Cardfight Vanguard Deer Days recently came out with a lot of new cards in order to spice up the game, and I wanted to see if I could win in ranked with all of them. With how many new and old decks became a lot better with this update, there were 14 decks that I felt got sufficient support to play, which were Youthberg, Leonore, Java, Orphis, Ava, Jadrul, Baramagnes, Bruce, Hexor, Grahamgrace, Eugene, Heroes, Alleglima, and Baphometes. There were a few decks that got some support cards that I didn't really think revolutionized the deck, so I didn't think those ones are too worth playing. Now, I thought this challenge might be a bit too easy. Sure, there were some decks I was a little nervous about, but I thought that I would be able to get a quick win with most of the decks in 1 or 2 games, so I thought I'd be able to complete the challenge in about 6 hours. And not wanting to waste any more time, I got right to work. The first deck I wanted to start out with was one that I thought might take a few tries, but overall wouldn't take too long. So I went with Leonore. I used the Aurora Ride line since it gives some free boosters and keeps soul for Leonore, plus it allows me to use Radalina in order to try and get some early game aggro and make the later turns with big power a lot more pressuring. But it wasn't quite enough to conquer the difficulties of being a 3-attack deck. But I was confident that we could get it in time, so we had to play some more, and then more and more, but just couldn't seem to find a match to win with Leonore. This is when the gravity of the challenge really started to set in. I realized that it wasn't enough to just play the deck and pull out a win after a few tries. I needed to be good with every single one of the 14 decks if I wanted a chance at finishing this challenge, let alone completing it within 6 hours. So since I was 1 hour deep already and still hadn't won with a single deck, I decided that I would take a break and switch over to some other ones that I knew a bit better. And I could not have made a better move. Youthberg, Java, Baramagnes, and Orphis all took a single game to win. And then we were right back on track. We even took another chance on Leonore and won the first game back. After another quick win with Ava, I was feeling hot. We were 6 decks through, and I still had a whole 3 hours left to burn. So I decided to go into one of the decks that I thought we might struggle with, which was Set 6 Jadrul. It came out in this update with a trial deck, but since it doesn't get most of its support cards until the next set, we had to make do. So I put in a grade 1 that would let me multi-attack when the attack it boosted hit to try and get a force swing in, along with Quen Lu to try and make the power difference really hurt. And we found the perfect opponent. They were using a lot of cards early, and we were able to put them to 4 damage before they even got to grade 3. This was the perfect game for us since tempo was in our favor, and all I had to do was make it through the turn, and I had a Persona Ride and only 2 damage to deal. But then I made a mistake. While I was too caught up in thinking about the next turn and the rest of the challenge, I forgot that I was only at 4 damage, and thought that I would need to guard every attack to live the turn. So I unnecessarily guarded the Vanguard for a 1 to pass, and they pulled a critical trigger. That mistake cost me a golden opportunity to get past one of the most difficult decks in the challenge, and I wasn't able to get anywhere close to another win with Jadrul after 3 more hours of playing. So my 6-hour time limit was up, and I wasn't even halfway through all of the decks. But by no means was I done. Although I said that I wanted to win in under 6 hours, the challenge was for me to win with all of the 14 decks in ranked, and I was not about to give up just because I couldn't do it on the first day. So the next stream I switched it up and started out with Alleglima, which uses a ton of set orders to try and restand rear guards and maybe even the Vanguard. And due to a lucky OT, we got the second hardest deck in the challenge out of the way in a flash. So I swapped back to Jadrul and had an amazing game against a Bruce player, and we were in an amazing position and pulled an OT for insult to injury. With that, we were finally past the halfway point of the challenge, and everything started to feel possible again. At this point, I only had to win with Bruce, Hexaorb, Grahamgrace, Eugene, Heroes, and Baphometes. Although I was still a little scared of Baphometes, the rest of the decks I knew would be infinitely easier and just take playing a few games to complete. So I took Bruce into the Crucible and they got a quick win in the mirror match, and then we had 9 decks complete. I took a few games to learn the ins and outs of Heroes, and then we finally hit double digits. After that was Eugene. This deck focused on using the new promo card to stack Esper Aridia on the top of the deck, and then using Eugene's skill to superior call it. And although it is memed on a bit, it did actually take me a bit of brain power and some time to learn how to optimally play the deck. It was surprisingly fun to pilot, and after a few games I got the hang of it and we got our 11th win. At this point, I was able to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Not including making the deck list, I had already spent 10 total hours on the challenge, and I was ready to finally finish it. Next up was Graham Grace. Now, the support that Graham Grace got was a promo that gives him 10k power and lets him do triple drive. And as of when I played the card, it didn't really work. It lets you pay the cost for the skill, but doesn't actually give the power or the drive check. But I did use a skill in a game and won said game, so that counts for me. Then after a few games with Hexaorb, I won with the 13th deck. There was only one deck left between me and the end of the craziest and hardest challenge I have ever done, which was Baphometes. This deck was the one I was most scared about among all of the 14 decks in the challenge. The deck requires you to run a lot of grade 3s so that you can use them for Baphometes' skill and accrue a lot of them into soul. But unlike Bastion, Baphometes is strictly a 3 attack deck. And unlike the other decks, this one didn't have a lot of gimmicks that I could use to try and pull ahead. Except for one. Merciless Count Botus was the gimmick of the deck that I needed to rely on. Its skill is that if you Soul Blast 2 or more cards at the same time for a card's cost, it gets 5,000 power. And if you Soul Blast 3 or more, then you can Counterblast 1 and put a card from your drop zone into your soul, and retire an opponent's rearguard of the same grade. Now I know what you might be thinking. How on earth is that going to be helpful? A retire 1 saving the deck? Baphometes can't even Soul Blast to activate this skill, which is all true, and why another card is vital to the deck. And that card is Shining Selfishness. Shining Selfishness is a blitz order that allows you to Soul Blast 4 and gain 5,000 power for each card in your damage zone until the end of the battle. When combined with the fact that Botus' skill isn't restricted to your turn, you can use this order to retire an opponent's rearguard during their own battle phase. This skyrockets the deck's defensive capabilities and helps make the 3-card guard skill of Baphometes much more pressuring. So, with only one deck left from the challenge, we set off. Our opponent was playing Dragonic Overlord, and from the start seemed like a tough matchup, since a Botus and Selfishness combo couldn't do much to stop a restanding Vanguard. But we got to put a lot of our grade 3s into our soul, and as I was trying to damage soak up to 5 to get the maximum value out of some of our cards, I got a defensive overtrigger. With the state of the game, I knew that even if my opponent pulled out all the stops, that I would be perfectly fine. So then I just tried to play my best game, but then they pulled out the biggest stop. Although I had a perfect card in hand to stop their Vanguard from restanding again, the extra hand from the second Vanguard attack was going to make the fight a bit more difficult. But since it gave the overtrigger power to their rearguard, I was able to pull off the best moment I have ever had and use our one gimmick to retire a unit with 100 million power. After that, Baphometes' 3-card guard skill and our huge columns went to work on our opponent's hand, and after another retire during our opponent's next turn, the game looked perfect for us. The deck had worked better than I had ever imagined. We had a huge hand, only 3 damage, and 30k plus rearguard columns. And after swinging for 1 more damage, it was finally over. We won with the 14th deck of the challenge after 13 total hours of countless fights, and finally completed the challenge. This was by far the craziest thing that I have done to date, and it was really satisfying to finish. And I know I usually say at the end of these videos to try it out for yourself and let me know how it goes, but I don't know if I can say that for this challenge. I think the only reason that I was able to stay sane was due to all of the awesome people who came by when I was streaming it. I think that if I tried to do this myself, it would have been absolute torture. But that being said, this is something that I plan to do with every new set that comes out for Deer Days. So if you don't want to miss that, then feel free to subscribe to the channel and follow me on Twitch too, since it will always be streamed there before I make it into a video. And with the next lyrical set just around the corner, well, let's just say that I think I know what the next video is going to be. But with all that said and done, I think I'm gonna go and never play some of those decks ever again. Have a great rest of your day. Is it bad that I'm actually kind of excited to try and do this for the next sets? It feels like it should be, but I'm happy that it isn't.